In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where thousands of species have formed the Galactic Federation, humans are still considered the newest members, barely tolerated, often underestimated, and frequently dismissed as weak prey species. Most aliens see humans as soft, emotional creatures who lack the predatory instincts necessary for true survival in the harsh reality of space. But sometimes the most profound changes in the universe begin with the smallest acts of kindness. When Marcus Chen, a human janitor working the night shift on Nexus Station, one of the galaxy's busiest trading hubs, heard a faint whimpering coming from the garbage compactor room, he had no idea that his decision to investigate would challenge everything the galaxy believed about humanity. What he found cowering behind a pile of discarded shipping containers would not only change his life forever, but send shockwaves through the entire Galactic Federation, because sometimes, when an apex predator's offspring is abandoned and dying, it takes a member of a prey species to show what true strength really means. The galaxy was about to learn that humans don't just survive, they protect. And when they protect, the universe itself takes notice. Marcus Chen pushed his maintenance cart down the empty corridors of Nexus Station. The soft hum of recycled air and distant engine vibrations his only companions during the night shift. The station never truly slept, but during the deep cycle hours, most of the traders, diplomats and travelers retreated to their quarters, leaving only essential personnel and the occasional insomniac wandering the vast metal halls. He preferred these quiet hours. As one of only 12 humans working on the massive space station, Marcus often felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations during the day shift. The other species regarded humans with a mixture of pity and bewilderment. How had such fragile creatures managed to develop spaceflight? How did they survive on a death world like Earth with no natural armor, no claws, no venom, and reaction times that most predators considered laughably slow? Marcus had heard the whispers. The Korathi traders called humans soft shells. The reptilian Vex referred to them as walking prey. Even the diplomatic Zentari, who prided themselves on politeness, had a term that roughly translated to sympathetic herbivores. It didn't matter that humans were technically omnivores, or that Earth's history was filled with examples of human tenacity and survival. In a galaxy where strength was measured by hunting prowess and predatory instincts, humanity's emphasis on cooperation and care for the weak marked them as inferior. But Marcus didn't let the attitudes bother him. He had a job to do, and he took pride in keeping his sections of the station spotless. The garbage compactor room was his last stop before heading back to the maintenance bay. And as he approached the heavy doors, something made him pause. A sound, barely audible above the station's ambient noise, but definitely there. A soft whimpering, like a wounded animal. Marcus frowned. The compactor room was supposed to be automated and empty during this cycle. He pressed his ear against the door, listening carefully. There it was again, weaker this time, but unmistakably the sound of something in distress. He keyed in his access code and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows between the towering piles of sorted refuse waiting for processing. The air was thick with the smell of discarded food from a dozen different species and the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. The whimpering came from behind a stack of shipping containers near the far wall. Marcus grabbed a portable light from his cart and made his way carefully through the maze of garbage. As he rounded the corner, his light fell upon something that made him gasp. Huddled against the wall was a small creature, no bigger than a human child. Its fur was matted and dirty, but Marcus could see the distinctive markings of a Thrakari cub. The sight sent a chill down his spine. The Thrakari were among the most feared predator species in the galaxy. Massive 8-foot-tall beings with razor-sharp claws, powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, and a reputation for ruthless efficiency in both hunting and warfare. But this wasn't a fearsome predator. This was a baby, thin and weak. Its normally silver fur dulled to a sickly gray. Its large golden eyes looked up at Marcus with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. One of its paws was caught under a fallen piece of debris, and Marcus could see that it had been trying to free itself for some time. Marcus set down his light and approached slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. The cub tried to growl, but the sound came out as more of a squeak. Its predatory instincts were there, but its body was too weak to back up its threats. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said gently, crouching down a few feet away. "You're hurt, aren't you?" The cub's ears flattened against its head, and it pressed itself harder against the wall. Marcus could see the intelligence in its eyes, the awareness that he was from a different species, and the fear that came with that knowledge. Marcus had studied xenobiology as part of his training. He knew that Thrakari cubs were born in litters of 3 to 5 and remained with their packs until they reached adolescence. Finding one alone, especially in such poor condition, meant something had gone terribly wrong. He also knew that helping it was incredibly dangerous. Adult Thrakari stood over 8 feet tall and possessed strength that could tear through most ship hulls. They were proud, territorial, and had little tolerance for other species interfering with their affairs. If this cub belonged to one of the Thrakari trade delegations currently on the station, Marcus could be starting a diplomatic incident. If it was part of a Thrakari military family, he might be signing his own death warrant. But looking at the small, frightened creature, Marcus found that the risks didn't matter. He saw pain and fear and desperate need, and his human instincts kicked in, not the instincts of a prey animal, but the deeper human drive to protect and care for the helpless. "Okay, little one, let me help you," he said, moving closer. The cub tried to snap at him, but its movements were sluggish. Marcus carefully examined the debris pinning its paw. It was a piece of broken shipping crate, heavy enough that the weakened cub couldn't lift it, but light enough for Marcus to move easily. "This is going to hurt a little, but then you'll be free," Marcus warned, positioning himself to lift the debris. The moment he touched the crate, the cub's demeanor changed. Instead of fear, Marcus saw something like wonder in its golden eyes. It stopped struggling and watched him intently as he carefully lifted the heavy piece and set it aside. The cub's paw was bruised but not broken. Marcus examined it gently, his human hands surprisingly gentle compared to the claws and talons most species possessed. The cub allowed the examination, seeming to understand that Marcus was trying to help. "You're dehydrated," Marcus observed, noting the cub's sunken eyes and dry nose. "And hungry. How long have you been here?" The cub made a soft sound, almost like a purr but weaker. It tried to stand but stumbled, its legs too weak to support its weight properly. Marcus looked around the compactor room, thinking quickly. He couldn't leave the cub here, but he also couldn't just walk through the station carrying a Thrakari youngster. The political implications alone would be staggering, not to mention the safety concerns. But as he watched the cub struggle to remain upright, swaying with exhaustion and dehydration, Marcus knew he couldn't abandon it. Whatever the consequences, he had to act. "All right, little one, we're going to get you some help," he decided. Marcus returned to his cart and pulled out a large maintenance container. It was designed for transporting hazardous materials and had its own air filtration system. Not the most comfortable transportation, but it would keep the cub safe and hidden. When he returned, the cub had managed to crawl a few feet toward where Marcus had been standing, as if seeking his presence. The sight tugged at Marcus's heart. This creature, born to be an apex predator, was acting like any lost child seeking comfort. "I know it's not ideal, but this will keep you safe while I figure out what to do," Marcus explained, opening the container and lining it with clean maintenance cloths. To his surprise, the cub didn't resist when he gently lifted it into the container. It was lighter than he expected, further evidence of its malnourished state. As he settled the cub inside, it looked up at him with those large golden eyes and made a soft sound that might have been gratitude. Marcus sealed the container, ensuring the airflow was adequate, and placed it on his cart. To anyone who might see him, he was simply transporting maintenance materials. The container's bioshields would hide the cub's life signs from casual scans. As he made his way through the station corridors toward his quarters, Marcus's mind raced. He needed to get the cub food and water, but what did infant Thrakari eat? He needed medical attention for its injuries, but taking it to the station's medical bay would immediately expose what he had done. He needed to find out where the cub had come from and why it was alone, but that meant making inquiries that could draw unwanted attention. Most pressingly, he needed to keep this secret until he could figure out the right course of action. If station security discovered what he was doing, the best-case scenario was immediate deportation. The worst case could involve charges of kidnapping a sentient being's offspring, which carried severe penalties under Galactic Federation law. But as Marcus entered his small quarters and carefully transferred the cub to his bed, watching as it immediately curled up in the warm blankets with a contented sigh, he knew he had made the right choice. The cub's breathing was steadier now, and some alertness had returned to its eyes. Marcus accessed the station's database from his personal terminal, carefully researching Thrakari biology and dietary requirements while keeping one eye on his unexpected guest. The cub had fallen into what appeared to be a healing sleep, its small chest rising and falling steadily. According to the database, Thrakari cubs were typically weaned by 6 months of age but could survive on nutrient-rich broths and soft proteins if necessary. The station's food synthesizers could produce appropriate meals, though Marcus would have to be careful about his requisition patterns to avoid suspicion. As for medical care, Marcus had basic first aid training, and the cub's injuries seemed to be primarily exhaustion and malnutrition rather than serious trauma. With proper care and nutrition, it should recover quickly. Thrakari were remarkably resilient, even as cubs. The more challenging question was what to do once the cub was healthy. Marcus couldn't keep it indefinitely, and he couldn't simply release it into the station's general population. He needed to find its family or, if they were gone, locate other Thrakari who could take responsibility for it. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Right now, his priority was keeping the little creature alive and safe. Marcus replicated a bowl of nutrient broth and gently woke the cub. It was alert immediately, those predatory instincts still functioning despite its weakened state. But when it saw Marcus, its posture relaxed slightly. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, offering the bowl. The cub sniffed cautiously, then began to drink. Its table manners were impeccable for a baby predator, and Marcus found himself smiling as he watched it eat. There was something endearing about the way it held the bowl with both paws and the soft purring sound it made between sips. When the cub finished eating, it looked around Marcus's quarters with curiosity. The space was small but comfortable, decorated with a few personal items from Earth and images of Marcus's family back home. The cub's eyes lingered on a photograph of Marcus with his nephew, a human child about the same apparent age as the cub itself. "That's my family," Marcus explained, following the cub's gaze. "My nephew Tommy. He's about your size." The cub tilted its head, processing this information. Then, to Marcus's amazement, it padded over to the photograph and gently touched the glass with one tiny claw, making a soft, questioning sound. "You understand, don't you?" Marcus said wonderingly. "You know what family means." The cub looked back at him, and Marcus saw something heartbreaking in those golden eyes. Loneliness, loss. This wasn't just a lost cub. This was an orphan, searching for belonging. Marcus knelt down and extended his hand slowly. The cub sniffed his fingers, then gently rubbed its head against his palm. The gesture was so trusting, so vulnerable, that Marcus felt his eyes water. "Don't worry, little one," he promised softly. "I'll take care of you. Whatever it takes, I'll make sure you're safe." The cub seemed to understand his tone, if not his words. It climbed onto the bed and curled up against the pillow, watching Marcus with sleepy contentment. Within minutes, it was asleep again. One small paw stretched out toward where Marcus sat. Marcus settled into his chair and began planning. He had roughly 6 hours before his next shift, and he needed to use that time wisely. Food, medical supplies, and, most importantly, information about any Thrakari delegations currently on the station. As he worked, Marcus reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. 12 hours ago, he had been a simple janitor, invisible to most of the station's population, dismissed as just another weak human trying to make a living in a galaxy that didn't quite know what to do with his species. Now he was harboring a Thrakari cub, one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and preparing to risk everything to protect it. The irony wasn't lost on him. The galaxy saw humans as prey animals, too soft and emotional to be taken seriously. But perhaps that was exactly what made them strong in ways the galaxy didn't understand. Looking at the sleeping cub, Marcus smiled. Tomorrow would bring challenges he couldn't imagine, decisions that would test everything he believed about right and wrong, and consequences that would ripple far beyond this small room. But tonight, a lost child was safe and warm and fed. Tonight, that was enough. Marcus woke to the sound of soft chittering and the sensation of something small but sharp poking at his shoulder. His eyes opened to find the Thrakari cub sitting on his chest, looking considerably more alert and healthy than it had the night before. Its golden eyes were bright, its fur had regained some of its natural silver sheen, and it was making what Marcus was beginning to recognize as happy sounds. "Good morning to you too, little one," Marcus said softly. "Careful not to make any sudden movements." The cub responded with a gentle head bonk against Marcus's chin, a gesture that he suspected was affectionate. It had clearly figured out that Marcus meant no harm and had decided to trust him completely. The transformation from the terrified, wounded creature he had found to this playful, affectionate youngster was remarkable. Marcus carefully sat up, and the cub immediately scrambled to his shoulder, balancing there with the natural grace of a born predator. Its small claws pricked through his shirt but didn't break skin. It seemed to understand instinctively how much pressure was appropriate for its fragile human friend. "We need to figure out what to call you," Marcus mused as he prepared another bowl of nutrient broth. "And more importantly, we need to figure out where you belong." The cub's ears drooped slightly at his serious tone, As if it understood they were discussing something important, Marcus set down the bowl and the cub immediately began eating, but with less enthusiasm than the night before. It kept looking up at Marcus between sips, those intelligent eyes seeming to read his mood. Marcus accessed his terminal and began searching through the station's arrival and departure logs. 3 Thrakari vessels had docked in the past week: a trade ship called the Silver Hunter, a diplomatic courier named the Star's Edge, and a private family transport designated the Blood Moon. All 3 were still in dock, which was unusual. Thrakari typically concluded their business quickly and departed. He also checked the station's security reports for any missing persons alerts or unusual incidents. What he found made his stomach drop. 2 days ago, there had been a reported domestic disturbance in the diplomatic quarters. Security had responded to noise complaints from neighboring suites, but had been turned away by diplomatic immunity protocols. The incident had involved the Blood Moon's passengers. Marcus cross-referenced the Blood Moon's passenger manifest. It was registered to Ambassador Kethvar and his family unit, his mate Sira Aish, and their 3 cubs aged between 6 months and 2 years. The manifest noted that they were traveling to the Galactic Council headquarters for what was described as family relocation proceedings. The pieces began falling into place, and Marcus felt a growing sense of dread. Family relocation proceedings usually meant one thing among Thrakari: divorce. But Thrakari divorce was nothing like human divorce. It was a brutal, often violent process where the stronger parent typically gained custody of the cubs, and the weaker cubs sometimes didn't survive the emotional trauma. Marcus looked down at the small creature finishing its breakfast. Had this little one been rejected by its family, left behind during the proceedings? Or worse, had it escaped from a situation that threatened its life? The cub finished eating and climbed back onto Marcus's shoulder, nuzzling against his neck with obvious contentment. Whatever had happened to separate it from its family, it showed no signs of wanting to return. If anything, it seemed to have decided that Marcus was now its family. Marcus knew he needed more information, but gathering it would be dangerous. He couldn't exactly walk up to a Thrakari diplomat and ask about missing cubs. But there was another option. The station's maintenance logs contained detailed information about every section, including the diplomatic quarters. As a senior maintenance worker, Marcus had access to environmental controls and cleaning schedules for most of the station. He could legitimately check the diplomatic quarters under the guise of routine maintenance and perhaps learn more about what had happened. "I have to go to work, little one," Marcus told the cub, "but I can't take you with me, and I can't leave you here alone." The cub tilted its head, processing this information. Then it did something that surprised Marcus. It hopped down from his shoulder and padded over to the maintenance container from the night before, climbing inside and looking at him expectantly. "You want to come with me? In there?" Marcus asked. The cub chittered what sounded like agreement and curled up in the container. Marcus realized that the cub had figured out their system. It understood that the container meant safety and movement, and it trusted Marcus enough to willingly confine itself. "You're a very smart little predator, aren't you?" Marcus said admiringly. The next few hours were nerve-wracking. Marcus went through his normal routine, cleaning public spaces and checking maintenance systems, all while carrying his secret passenger. The cub remained perfectly quiet in the container, somehow understanding that discovery would be dangerous for both of them. When Marcus finally reached the diplomatic quarters, he used his access codes to enter the maintenance areas. The Thrakari suite was at the end of the corridor, and even from outside, Marcus could sense the tension. The air recycling systems showed elevated stress pheromones, and the sound dampeners had been working overtime. Marcus checked his scanner and confirmed that the suite was currently empty. He made his way inside, ostensibly checking environmental controls but really searching for clues about what had happened to the cub's family. What he found was disturbing. The suite showed signs of significant conflict. Furniture displaced, stress marks on the walls from claws, and a lingering scent of fear and anger. In what appeared to be a sleeping area, Marcus found small tufts of silver fur caught on sharp edges, evidence of a struggle involving someone very small. But the most telling evidence was what he didn't find. The suite was configured for a family of 5, but only 3 sleeping areas showed recent use. 2 smaller areas, clearly meant for cubs, had been stripped of all personal belongings and showed no signs of recent habitation. Marcus felt sick. It appeared that 2 of the 3 cubs had been abandoned or rejected during the family proceedings. He had found one, but where was the other? A sound from the main room made him freeze. Voices, adult Thrakari voices, speaking in their rapid, chittering language. Marcus quickly sealed the environmental panel he had been checking and tried to think of an escape route. The maintenance areas had secondary exits, but he would have to cross the main room to reach them. The voices grew louder, and Marcus caught enough words to understand they were discussing the disposition of inferior offspring. His blood ran cold. They weren't just talking about abandoning the cubs, they were discussing whether the cubs should be allowed to live at all. Marcus made his decision. He activated his maintenance communicator and sent a false alert about an environmental hazard in a different section of the station. Within moments, emergency announcements began echoing through the diplomatic quarters, requiring all residents to evacuate temporarily. As the Thrakari rushed out to comply with the emergency protocols, Marcus slipped through the secondary exit and made his way quickly back to the maintenance areas. His heart was pounding, and the container on his cart seemed to grow heavier with each step. Once he was safely back in the public areas, Marcus allowed himself to breathe again. The cub had remained perfectly quiet throughout the entire incident, somehow sensing the danger without being told. But Marcus's relief was short-lived. As he continued his rounds, he began noticing things that made him increasingly uneasy. Security personnel seemed more alert than usual, and he overheard conversations about enhanced screening procedures and potential biological hazards. When Marcus returned to his quarters during his break, he carefully let the cub out of its container. It immediately climbed onto his shoulder and began making soft, concerned sounds. It could sense his stress. "I know what happened to you, little one," Marcus said gently. "And I'm so sorry." The cub nuzzled against his neck, offering what comfort it could. Marcus found it remarkable that a creature that had been so brutally rejected could still offer affection and trust so freely. Marcus accessed the station's communication system and sent a carefully worded message to his supervisor, requesting permission to investigate reports of environmental contamination in the waste processing areas. It would give him legitimate access to sections of the station where he might find the cub's sibling. But as he prepared to resume his search, an announcement echoed through the station that made his blood freeze. "Attention all personnel. Be advised that station security is conducting a search for missing biological specimens. Any unusual animal life should be reported immediately. Do not approach or attempt to contain unknown specimens." Marcus looked at the cub, who was watching him with those intelligent golden eyes. The little creature seemed to understand that something significant had changed. Its ears flattened against its head, and it moved closer to Marcus, seeking protection. "They're looking for you," Marcus whispered. "Maybe for your sibling, too." The official announcement didn't mention Thrakari cubs specifically, but Marcus knew that was what they were really searching for. The question was whether they were trying to rescue the cubs or eliminate them as evidence of what had happened in the diplomatic quarters. Marcus made another decision that would change everything. He accessed his personal communicator and sent a message to Dr. Larson. "Sarah Chan, the station's head xenobiologist and, coincidentally, his sister. If anyone could help him navigate this situation safely, it would be Sarah." The reply came within minutes. "Marcus, what have you gotten yourself into? Meet me in Lab 7 during the next shift change. Come alone and bring whatever you're hiding." Marcus smiled grimly. Sarah had always been able to read him like a book, even across light years of space. But he also knew that Sarah would help him do the right thing, regardless of the personal cost. The next few hours crawled by. Marcus completed his assigned duties while constantly watching for signs that his secret had been discovered. The cub seemed to sense the increased tension and remained perfectly still in its container, somehow understanding that its very life depended on staying hidden. When shift change finally arrived, Marcus made his way to Lab 7 through the quietest routes he could find. Sarah was waiting for him, her expression a mixture of concern and exasperation. "Show me," she said simply. Marcus carefully opened the container, and the Thrakari cub peered out cautiously. When it saw Sarah, it immediately hid behind Marcus, clearly recognizing that she was a stranger, but trusting Marcus enough to stay calm. Sarah's eyes widened. "Marcus, do you have any idea what you've done?" "That's a Thrakari cub. Do you know what the penalties are for saving a child's life?" Marcus interrupted quietly. "Yes, I know what the laws say. But look at it, Sarah. Really look at it." Sarah approached slowly, her scientific training overriding her initial shock. The cub watched her warily but didn't flee. Sarah nodded. Its healthy appearance, its obvious attachment to Marcus, and most tellingly, its complete lack of fear toward humans. "It trusts you completely," Sarah observed. "That's remarkable. Thrakari cubs usually bond only with their birth parents, and perhaps one or two close relatives. I found it dying in the garbage compactor room," Marcus explained. "Its family abandoned it. They're planning to eliminate both it and its sibling as inferior offspring." Sarah's expression hardened. She had studied Thrakari culture extensively and knew exactly what Marcus was describing. That's barbaric even by their standards. Are you certain about the sibling? There's another cub out there somewhere, probably just as scared and alone as this one was. I have to find it. Marcus, you don't understand the political implications here. If Ambassador Kefar learns that you've interfered with his family affairs, then what? He'll have me executed? Sarah, I can't live with myself knowing there are children suffering when I could have helped them. The cub seemed to follow the conversation despite not understanding the words. It climbed down from Marcus's shoulder and padded over to Sarah, sitting down in front of her and looking up with those large golden eyes. Sarah knelt down slowly, extending her hand. The cub sniffed her fingers, then gently rubbed its head against her palm in the same gesture it had used with Marcus. It's asking for help, Sarah whispered. Not just for itself, but for its sibling. Look at its eyes, Marcus. It knows there's another one out there. The siblings exchanged a look of understanding. They had both dedicated their lives to helping others, and they weren't going to stop now just because the stakes had gotten higher. All right, Sarah said finally. What do you need? Medical supplies, better nutrition, and help searching the station safely. But Sarah, if we get caught, we get caught together. But we're not going to let children die just because some diplomat thinks they're inconvenient. The cub, as if understanding that an important decision had been made, chittered happily and rubbed against both siblings. For the first time since this ordeal began, Marcus felt like he might actually succeed. But none of them knew that their conversation had been monitored, and that forces far more dangerous than station security were already moving against them. Dr. Sarah Chen ran her scanner over the Thakari cub for the third time, shaking her head in amazement. Marcus, this little one is healthier than most adult Thrakari I've examined. Whatever you've been doing, it's working. The cub sat patiently on the examination table, occasionally chirping at Marcus when the scanner's humming grew too loud. It had accepted Sarah completely now, understanding somehow that she was trying to help. When Sarah gently examined its previously injured paw, it held perfectly still, displaying a level of trust and cooperation that impressed the xenobiologist. Its neural development is remarkable too, Sarah continued, making notes on her tablet. The brain scans show problem-solving capabilities well above normal for a Thrakari cub this age. It's almost as if being around humans has accelerated its cognitive development. Marcus watched the cub carefully as it explored the laboratory. It showed interest in everything, but was remarkably careful not to disturb or damage anything. When it encountered a delicate instrument, it would sniff it curiously and then look at Sarah as if asking permission before investigating further. Have you decided what to call it? Sarah asked. Marcus smiled. Actually, I think it chose its own name. Yesterday, when I was working on my terminal, I had some old Earth music playing. When a song called Silver came on, it perked up immediately and started making happy sounds. It's been responding to that name ever since. As if summoned, Silver padded over to Marcus and climbed up to its favorite perch on his shoulder. The cub had developed a routine of checking on Marcus regularly, as if making sure he was still there and still safe.
Silver suits it, Sarah agreed.
Though we may have bigger problems than names, I've been monitoring station communications and there's definitely increased security activity. They're not just looking for biological specimens anymore. They're specifically searching for Thrakari cubs. Any word on the sibling? Sarah's expression grew grim. That's the concerning part. Security reports indicate they found traces of Thakari DNA in several sections of the station, but they haven't found another cub. Either it's very good at hiding, or she didn't need to finish. They both knew that a weak, abandoned cub might not survive long without help. Silver seemed to sense the shift in mood. It made a soft questioning sound and looked between the two humans with obvious concern. Then it did something that surprised them both. It hopped down from Marcus's shoulder and padded to the laboratory's main viewer, pressing its small paws against the transparent aluminum and looking out at the station corridors. It knows, Sarah breathed. It knows there's another cub out there. Silver turned back to them and made a series of chittering sounds, its tone urgent and plaintive. It was clearly trying to communicate something important. Marcus knelt down beside the cub. You want to help find your sibling, don't you? Silver's response was immediate and unmistakable. It ran to Marcus's maintenance container and climbed inside, then looked back at him expectantly. The message was clear. It wanted to help search, and it was ready to travel. Absolutely not, Sarah said firmly. Marcus, taking Silver with us is too dangerous. If security catches us with it... Silver interrupted with a series of sharp chirps, its tone almost scolding. Then it did something remarkable. It padded over to Sarah's computer terminal and began pawing at the screen, displaying the station map. It's trying to show us something, Marcus realized. Sarah activated the touch interface and watched in amazement as Silver began manipulating the display. The cub's small claws were surprisingly precise as it zoomed in on specific sections of the station. It highlighted 3 areas: the garbage compactor room where Marcus had found it, a section near the main power core, and an area close to the outer docking rings. Those are all maintenance areas, Marcus observed, places where someone small could hide and scavenge for food and water. Silver chittered agreement and tapped the power core area repeatedly. Then it looked up at Marcus and made a soft, sad sound. Your sibling is there, Marcus understood, and it's in trouble. Sarah studied the display. That section is heavily shielded and rarely patrolled, but it's also dangerous. The radiation levels aren't lethal, but prolonged exposure could cause serious health problems, especially for a young Thrakari. Marcus was already reaching for his maintenance gear. Then we need to get there quickly. Marcus, wait. We need a plan. That area requires special clearance, and if security is conducting searches... Sarah, if there's a cub dying in that section, we can't wait for a perfect plan. Silver is the only one who might be able to communicate with its sibling, and every minute we delay could be critical. Sarah looked at Silver, who was watching their conversation intently. The little cub seemed to understand the stakes and the danger. When Sarah met its golden eyes, she saw not just intelligence but determination and courage that reminded her strongly of human resolve. All right, Sarah decided. But we do this smart. I'll create a medical emergency that requires immediate access to that section. Suspected radiation exposure from a damaged containment unit. That will give us legitimate access and explain why we're there with medical equipment. Marcus smiled gratefully at his sister. What about Silver? Silver comes with us. If its sibling is as frightened and traumatized as Silver was when you found it, we'll need someone it trusts to approach safely. Silver chittered happily and immediately climbed into its container. But as Marcus sealed it up, the cub made one more sound, a low, thrumming call that seemed to carry through the laboratory's walls. What was that? Sarah asked. I think it's calling to its sibling, Marcus realized, letting it know help is coming. They made their way through the station corridors with carefully maintained casual efficiency. Sarah carried medical equipment while Marcus pushed his maintenance cart. To outside observers, they appeared to be responding to a routine emergency call. But as they approached the power core section, they began encountering security checkpoints. The guards were polite but thorough, scanning their equipment and verifying their credentials. Marcus felt his heart pound every time they approached Silver's container. But the bioshields held, and the cub remained perfectly silent. The power core section was a maze of corridors lined with massive conduits and processing units. The hum of energy was constant, and radiation warnings were posted at regular intervals. It was exactly the kind of place where a small, frightened cub might hide. The radiation levels are actually not too bad, Sarah reported, checking her scanner. Elevated, but not immediately dangerous. A cub could survive here for days or even weeks if it was resourceful. They began a systematic search, with Marcus checking maintenance areas while Sarah scanned for biological signs. Silver remained in its container but made occasional soft calls that echoed through the corridors. After an hour of searching, they were beginning to lose hope. The power core section was larger than they had anticipated, with dozens of potential hiding places. If the sibling was here, it was either very well hidden or too weak to respond to Silver's calls. Then Marcus heard something that made him freeze. A faint scratching sound, coming from inside one of the main power conduits. He signaled Sarah over and pointed to an access panel that showed signs of having been recently disturbed. Sarah scanned the area carefully. There's definitely a life sign in there, but it's very weak. Whatever's inside that conduit is in serious trouble. Marcus opened Silver's container, and the cub immediately climbed out and pressed its ear to the access panel. The scratching sound came again, and Silver responded with excited chittering. It's definitely its sibling, Marcus confirmed. But how do we get it out? Those conduits are shielded and electrified. Sarah was already working on her tablet. I can temporarily reroute power through backup systems, but we'll only have about 10 minutes before automated systems restore the main power flow. As Sarah initiated the power reroute, Silver moved to the access panel and began making a series of complex sounds. Not just calls, but what sounded like actual communication. The scratching from inside the conduit changed in response, becoming more purposeful. It's talking to its sibling, Marcus realized, explaining what's happening. When Sarah completed the power shutdown, Marcus carefully opened the access panel. The space inside was cramped and dark, designed for automated maintenance drones rather than living creatures. What they found inside broke their hearts. A second Thrakari cub, smaller than Silver and clearly female, was huddled at the back of the conduit. Unlike Silver, who had been merely undernourished when Marcus found it, this cub was seriously ill. Her fur was patchy and dull, her breathing was labored, and her eyes showed the glassy look of high fever. But when she saw Silver, she managed a weak chirp of recognition. Silver immediately scrambled into the conduit and nuzzled against his sister, making soft, comforting sounds. Severe malnutrition and what looks like radiation sickness, Sarah diagnosed quickly. She needs immediate medical attention. Marcus carefully extracted both cubs from the conduit. The female cub was so weak she could barely lift her head, but she seemed to understand that Marcus and Sarah were trying to help. When Marcus cradled her gently, she made a soft sound that might have been gratitude. Silver stayed close to his sister throughout the extraction, clearly distressed by her condition but determined not to leave her side. When they placed both cubs in the expanded medical container Sarah had brought, Silver curled up protectively around his sibling.
We need to get her to the medical bay, Sarah said urgently.
But that means exposing what we've done. Not necessarily, Marcus replied, thinking quickly. Doctor, Yates in the veterinary section owes me a favor. She might be able to treat the cub quietly. They were preparing to leave when an alarm began sounding throughout the power core section. Emergency lights flashed and automated voices announced a security lockdown. They've found us, Sarah said grimly. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, accompanied by the distinctive sound of Thrakari claws on metal flooring. They were being approached by both station security and what sounded like adult Thrakari. Marcus looked at the container holding both cubs. Silver was alert and protective, while his sister barely seemed conscious. There was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Sarah, take the cubs and get to Dr. Yates. I'll delay them as long as I can. Marcus, no. We stay together. Someone has to protect them. Please, Sarah. Silver trusts you now, and his sister needs immediate medical attention. Before Sarah could argue further, the security team rounded the corner. Leading them was Ambassador HFY himself, his massive form imposing even by Thrakari standards. His golden eyes blazed with fury, and his claws were extended in a clear threat display. Behind the ambassador were two other adult Thrakari and a squad of station security officers. They had Marcus and Sarah completely surrounded. Return my offspring, human, Ambassador HFY growled, his voice carrying the deadly undertones that marked him as a dominant predator. You have committed acts of theft and interference that demand punishment. Marcus stepped protectively in front of the container. Those cubs were dying. You abandoned them. Those cubs were rejected for cause. They are weak, inferior, unsuited for survival. By interfering, you have only prolonged their suffering. By interfering, I saved their lives. Ambassador HFY's laugh was like breaking glass. Saved them? For what? To live as pets? To exist as mockeries of what they should have been? You understand nothing of Thrakari nature, human. But, as the ambassador spoke, Silver emerged from the container. The young cub placed itself between Marcus and the adults, its small form dwarfed by the massive Thrakari, but its posture defiant and protective. And in that moment, the dynamics of the entire confrontation changed. Because Silver wasn't acting like a weak, rejected cub, it was acting like exactly what it was, a young predator protecting its family. The corridor fell silent as Silver faced down Ambassador HFY. The tiny Thrakari cub, barely reaching the ambassador's knee, had positioned itself in a perfect defensive stance. Claws extended, ears back, tail rigid. But most remarkable was the sound it was making. Not the frightened whimpering of a rejected cub, but a low, thrumming growl that resonated with surprising authority. Ambassador HFY's eyes widened in shock. The other adult Thrakari took involuntary steps backward. Even the human security officers seemed to sense that something significant was happening. Impossible, HFY breathed. That is the challenge call of a pack leader. Silver maintained its protective stance, continuing the low growl while keeping its golden eyes fixed on the ambassador. Behind it, its sister stirred weakly in the container, responding to Silver's call with soft chirps of encouragement. Marcus felt the tension in the air shift. He didn't understand Thrakari social dynamics completely, but he could see that Silver's behavior was having a profound effect on the adults. This wasn't the reaction of a weak, rejected offspring. This was something else entirely. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her scientific training overriding the diplomatic chaos. Ambassador, with respect, I need to examine the female cub immediately. She's showing signs of severe radiation poisoning and malnutrition. Without immediate medical attention, she'll die within hours. Kethvar's gaze flickered between Silver, who continued its protective display, and the container where the female cub lay dying. She was already dead to us. The weak have no place. Silver's growl intensified, and it took a step forward, directly challenging the massive ambassador. The sound it made was unmistakably threatening, despite coming from such a small creature. One of the other adult Thrakari, a female who Marcus assumed was Kethvar's mate, spoke in rapid Thrakari. Her tone was urgent, almost panicked. Kethvar responded with angry chittering, but Marcus noticed his aggressive posture beginning to shift.
What are they saying? Marcus asked Sarah quietly.
Sarah had studied Thrakari linguistics extensively. The female is telling him that Silver is displaying alpha behaviors. She's saying it's impossible for a rejected cub to show leadership traits, and that maybe they were wrong about both cubs. Kethvar suddenly roared, a sound that echoed through the corridors and made the human security officers reach for their weapons. But he wasn't roaring at Silver. He was roaring in frustration and confusion. "You have corrupted them," he snarled at Marcus. "Poisoned their minds with your weak human emotions." "I haven't corrupted anything," Marcus replied calmly, despite his racing heart. "I've simply shown them kindness and protection. If that's corruption in your eyes, then your definition of strength is flawed." Silver, still maintaining its protective stance, made a series of complex chittering sounds directed at Kethvar. The ambassador's eyes grew even wider. "It's speaking formal challenge language," Sarah whispered. "Marcus, I think Silver is formally challenging the ambassador's authority over the cubs. Can it do that? It's just a baby." In Thrakari culture, any member of the species can issue a formal challenge if they believe leadership has failed in its duties to protect the pack. Age doesn't matter, only the strength to back up the challenge. Kethvar seemed to be struggling with the decision. He looked at Silver, then at the dying female cub, then at Marcus. His massive claws flexed repeatedly, and Marcus could see the internal battle playing out in his alien features. Finally, Kethvar spoke in heavily accented standard. "You understand nothing of our ways, human. These cubs were rejected because they showed no fire, no strength, no leadership. They were weak and passive, unworthy of the bloodline." "Maybe they were weak because they were afraid," Marcus suggested. "Maybe they needed someone to believe in them before they could believe in themselves." "Thrakari cubs do not need—" Silver interrupted with another series of chittering sounds, this time directed at the sick female cub. To everyone's amazement, the dying cub managed to lift her head and respond with weak but determined chirps. "She's agreeing to join the challenge," Sarah translated, her voice filled with wonder. "Both cubs are formally challenging their parents' right to abandon them." The female Thrakari stepped forward again, speaking rapidly to her mate. Marcus caught enough words to understand she was urging Kethvar to reconsider. The situation was becoming untenable. If the cubs followed through with their formal challenge and were subsequently harmed, it would create a diplomatic incident that could affect Thrakari standing throughout the Federation. But more than that, Marcus could see something changing in both adult Thrakari. They were looking at their cubs, really looking at them. For perhaps the first time. Silver's protective stance, its willingness to challenge authority to protect its sibling, the dying female's determination to support the challenge despite her weakness, these were not the behaviors of inferior offspring. Station Commander Torres chose that moment to arrive with additional security. The human commander took in the scene quickly. 2 species in apparent standoff, a sick alien child, and what appeared to be some kind of formal diplomatic challenge in progress. "Ambassador Kethvar," Commander Torres said carefully, "I understand there's been some confusion about missing cubs. Perhaps we should move this discussion to more appropriate quarters." "There is no confusion," Kethvar replied, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "These cubs were properly rejected under Thrakari law." Silver made another sound, this one clearly directed at Commander Torres. The cub had somehow figured out that the commander was the highest-ranking human present and was appealing directly to her authority. Commander Torres looked at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, I believe you have some explaining to do." Before Marcus could respond, Silver did something unprecedented. It padded over to Commander Torres and sat down in front of her, looking up with those intelligent golden eyes. Then it made a sound. Not a growl or a challenge call, but something plaintive and trusting. "It's asking for protection," Sarah realized. Silver is formally requesting sanctuary under Federation law. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If a sentient being requested sanctuary, the Federation was legally bound to investigate the circumstances and provide protection until a resolution could be reached. The cubs couldn't be simply handed back to their parents without a formal hearing. Kethvar roared again, this time in pure rage. This is intolerable. These are my offspring. No human authority has jurisdiction over Thrakari family matters. Actually, Ambassador, Commander Torres said calmly, once a formal sanctuary request is made by a sentient being on Federation territory, we do have jurisdiction. The cubs will remain in protective custody until their status can be determined by proper authorities. But as the legal and diplomatic arguments continued, Marcus noticed that the female cub had become completely still. Her breathing was barely perceptible, and her eyes had lost focus. She's dying, Marcus said urgently, cutting through the debate. Silver immediately abandoned its formal stance and rushed to its sister's side, making distressed sounds. The dying cub managed one weak chirp in response before her eyes closed completely. Dr. Sarah Chen moved into action immediately. I need to get her to medical facilities now or we're going to lose her. For a moment, the corridor was silent, except for Silver's anguished cries and the soft hum of Sarah's medical scanner. Then Kethvar did something no one expected. He stepped forward and knelt beside the container. The massive Thrakari ambassador looked down at his dying daughter with an expression Marcus had never seen before. It took Marcus a moment to recognize it as grief. She is dying because of our decisions, Kethvar said quietly. Because we chose pride over compassion, tradition over love. Silver looked up at its father with streaming eyes. Marcus hadn't known Thrakari could cry, and made a soft, pleading sound. Kethvar reached out with one massive claw and gently touched his daughter's fevered brow. I have been wrong, he admitted, the words seeming to tear from his throat. These cubs are not weak. They are different, and perhaps difference is not weakness. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Ambassador, if you give permission for medical treatment, do what you must, Kethvar said, his voice breaking. Save my daughter, both my children. I have lost the right to call myself their father, but perhaps they might find it in themselves to forgive an old fool. Silver's response was immediate. The young cub threw itself against Kethvar's massive leg, clinging to him while making sounds that Marcus couldn't translate but understood perfectly. Forgiveness. Love, the desperate need for family. Commander Torres took control of the situation. Dr. Polior, Chen, take the cubs to Medical Bay 1 immediately. Ambassador, you and your mate are welcome to accompany them. Mr. Chen, you'll need to provide a full report, but that can wait. As they rushed through the corridors toward the medical bay, Marcus found himself running beside Ambassador Kethvar. The massive Thrakari was cradling Silver gently while keeping pace with the medical transport carrying the female cub. Human, Kethvar said as they ran, I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You have shown my children what it means to be truly strong. I just showed them kindness, Marcus replied. Anyone would have done the same. Kethvar's laugh was bitter. No, Marcus Chen. Not anyone would have risked everything for abandoned cubs of another species. You have done something remarkable. You have taught predators how to love. They arrived at the medical bay just as alarms began sounding throughout the station. But these weren't security alarms. They were emergency alerts about an incoming distress signal from a damaged ship. Commander Torres's voice echoed through the corridors. All medical personnel to emergency stations. We have incoming casualties from the merchant vessel Star's Promise. Multiple species, unknown injuries, ETA 15 minutes. Marcus looked around the medical bay, where Dr. Kimmington, Yates was already beginning emergency treatment on the female cub while Sarah monitored her vital signs. Silver sat pressed against its father's leg, watching the medical procedures with obvious anxiety, but trusting the humans to help. Commander, Marcus called out. If you need additional medical support, the Thrakari have some of the most advanced emergency medicine in the galaxy. Ambassador Kethvar's medical knowledge could save lives. Kethvar looked at Marcus with surprise and respect. You would trust me to help? After everything that has happened? I would trust anyone who loves their children as much as you do. Marcus replied simply. And in that moment, as the station prepared for the incoming medical emergency, something shifted in the relationship between humans and Thrakari. It wasn't just about the cubs anymore. It was about what two very different species could accomplish when they chose cooperation over conflict, understanding over prejudice. But neither Marcus nor HFY realized that their actions were being watched and recorded by observers who saw their cooperation as a threat to the carefully maintained balance of power in the galaxy. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of Nexus Station watching the morning shift change. The corridors below bustled with activity as dozens of species went about their daily routines, but something fundamental had changed in the way they interacted with each other. Near the central plaza, he could see Ambassador HFY deep in conversation with a group of Zentari diplomats, while his cubs, both healthy and thriving now, played nearby. Silver had grown considerably, its silver fur now gleaming with health, while its sister Aria, a name she had chosen for herself after learning about human music, had developed into a graceful young predator with a keen interest in xenobiology. The cubs moved freely between species groups, equally comfortable with Thrakari adults, human children, and even the usually aloof Karathi traders. Their easy acceptance of diversity had become a model for interspecies cooperation throughout the station. Impressive, isn't it? Dr. Sarah Chen joined Marcus at the observation window, carrying a tablet full of research data. The psychological profiles we've compiled on both cubs show development patterns we've never seen before in Thrakari. They're displaying empathy levels typically associated with cooperative species like humans and Zentari. Marcus smiled as he watched Silver carefully help a young human child reach something on a high shelf, while Arya translated between a frustrated Vex trader and a confused Korathi merchant. They're not becoming less Thrakari, they're becoming better Thrakari.
The implications are staggering, Marcus.
We're seeing evidence that predator species can develop cooperative behaviors when raised in multi-species environments. This could reshape everything we understand about species compatibility and galactic politics. Below them, Ambassador HFY looked up and waved. The massive Thrakari had become an unlikely advocate for interspecies cooperation, using his influence to promote what he called strength through unity, rather than the traditional Thrakari emphasis on dominance through conflict. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been formal challenges from other Thrakari families who viewed HFY's new philosophy as weakness. But when Silver and Arya had stood with their father during the formal hearings, demonstrating the complex problem-solving skills and leadership abilities they had developed, even the most traditional Thrakari had been forced to reconsider their assumptions. Marcus's communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. Commander Torres wanted to see him in her office immediately. He found the commander reviewing what appeared to be classified Federation reports. When she looked up, her expression was serious but not unfriendly. Sit down, Marcus. We need to talk about your future. Marcus took a seat, wondering if he was about to be transferred or disciplined. Despite the positive outcomes, he had still violated numerous regulations when he rescued the cubs. I've been reviewing your performance reports, Commander Torres continued, and I have to say they make for interesting reading. 6 months ago, you were a maintenance worker with a clean but unremarkable record. Today, you're being cited in xenobiological research papers, diplomatic protocol revisions, and Federation policy recommendations. She turned her monitor so Marcus could see the screen. It showed a formal document with the Federation Council's official seal. The Council has been following the developments here on Nexus Station with considerable interest. The integration success we've achieved between humans and Thrakari has exceeded anything predicted by the Diplomatic Corps. They want to know how we did it. Marcus read the document quickly. It was a formal request for him to testify before the Federation Council about interspecies cooperation protocols. They want me to speak to the Council. Commander, I'm just a janitor. I clean things. Commander Torres smiled. Marcus, you're the human who taught a predator species about compassion. You're the maintenance worker who prevented a diplomatic crisis and potentially changed the course of interspecies relations. The Council doesn't want to hear from a diplomat or a scientist. They want to hear from the person who actually made it happen. Before Marcus could respond, there was a soft chiming at the office door. Commander Torres activated the entrance, and Silver and Arya bounded in, followed more sedately by Ambassador HFY. Uncle Marcus, Arya chirped, using the human term of endearment she had adopted. Papa said you might be leaving the station. Silver immediately climbed into Marcus's lap. Something it had done since cubhood, but which was becoming increasingly challenging as it grew larger. The young Thrakari made concerned sounds and nuzzled against Marcus's chest. I'm not leaving, little ones, Marcus assured them. I might have to travel to give some speeches, but this is my home. You're my family. HFY approached more formally, but Marcus could see the concern in the ambassador's golden eyes. Over the months, the Thrakari had become as protective of Marcus as he was of the cubs. Commander Torres, Kethvar said. If Marcus is to address the Federation Council, the Thrakari delegation formally requests permission to accompany him as character witnesses and cultural consultants. And the Cubs? Commander Torres asked with amusement. The Cubs, Arya declared firmly, go where Uncle Marcus goes. We are Pack. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. Somewhere along the way, he had gained a family he never expected. 2 alien cubs who had chosen him as their guardian, and a massive predator who had become his closest friend and ally. Actually, Commander Torres said, that brings up another matter. The Federation Council has authorized the creation of a new position, Interspecies Integration Specialist. It's a diplomatic post with scientific research components based here on Nexus Station. They're offering you the position, Marcus. Marcus stared at her in shock. Me? But I don't have any diplomatic training, any scientific credentials. You have something better, Kethvar interrupted. You have instincts that transcend species barriers. You see need and respond to it, regardless of political implications or social conventions. That is true strength. Commander Torres nodded. The Council agrees. They want you to develop protocols for interspecies cooperation based on your experiences here. You'll work with diplomats, scientists, and cultural experts from dozens of species, but you'll be the lead coordinator. Silver and Arya chittered excitedly, while Kethvar's chest swelled with obvious pride. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. What about my cubs? He asked. I can't abandon Silver and Arya. Who said anything about abandoning anyone? Commander Torres smiled. The position comes with family accommodation provisions. All 3 of you would have official status as cultural liaison specialists. Arya bounced up and down with excitement. Does that mean we get to meet other species, learn about their cubs, help other families like ours? Yes, little scientist, Kethvar said fondly. That is exactly what it means. Marcus looked around the office. At Commander Torres with her confident smile, at Kethvar with his proud bearing, and at Silver and Arya with their eager faces, and realized that his life had become something he never could have imagined. A year ago, he had been a lonely maintenance worker, dismissed by most of the galaxy as just another weak human trying to survive among stronger species. Today, he was being offered a chance to help reshape interspecies relations throughout the Federation, with the support of a family that spanned species barriers. I accept, Marcus said simply. Silver and Arya erupted in joyful chittering, while Kethvar placed one massive hand on Marcus's shoulder in a gesture of paternal approval. There's one more thing, Commander Torres added as the celebration died down. Your first assignment will be to establish an integration center here on Nexus Station, a place where different species can come to learn about cooperation, to resolve conflicts, and to help abandoned or displaced individuals find new families. Marcus smiled, thinking of all the lonely beings who might find their way to such a place. We'll need a good name for it. I have a suggestion, Arya said shyly. In Thrakari, there's a word. Kethara. It means place where the lost find home. Kethara, Marcus repeated, tasting the alien syllables. I like it. As they left Commander Torres's office together, the human janitor who had become a diplomat, the Thrakari ambassador who had learned about love, and the 2 cubs who had bridged the gap between species, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy had seen humans as weak, emotional creatures suitable only for menial tasks. They had dismissed human compassion as a liability, human cooperation as naivety, and human protective instincts as misplaced sentiment. But in saving 2 abandoned cubs, Marcus had demonstrated that human weakness was actually a profound strength. The ability to see past species barriers, to respond to need regardless of political considerations, to choose love over fear. These weren't character flaws. They were exactly the qualities the galaxy needed to truly unite its diverse populations. 6 months later, when the Kethara Integration Center officially opened, representatives from 47 different species attended the ceremony. The center's first residents were a group of mixed-species orphans who had been abandoned during a border conflict, an elderly Zentari whose family had been lost in a transport accident, and a young Korathi who had been cast out for refusing to follow traditional caste restrictions. Marcus watched from the center's main hall as Silver and Arya led a group of youngsters from 6 different species in what appeared to be a game that combined elements from all their cultures. Their laughter, chittering, clicking, humming, and yes, human giggling, filled the space with a symphony of unity. Ambassador Kethvar appeared at Marcus's side, as had become their custom during important moments. No regrets? The Thrakari asked. Marcus smiled, watching as a tiny Vex hatchling climbed confidently onto Silver's back while Arya patiently taught a young Zentari how to use human play equipment. None, Marcus said firmly. This is exactly where I belong. The galaxy is changing, my friend. Not everyone approves of what we've accomplished here. Marcus nodded. He was aware that their success had created opposition among those who preferred the old ways of strict species separation and hierarchical power structures. But watching the integrated families they had created, seeing beings from different species choosing love over prejudice, Marcus knew they were on the right path. Change is never easy, Kethvar, but some changes are worth fighting for. As if summoned by their conversation, Silva and Arya bounded over with their multi-species playgroup in tow. The young Thrakari were now nearly adolescent size, but had lost none of their affectionate nature. Uncle Marcus, Uncle Kethava, Arya called out excitedly. We're teaching everyone about different family structures. Did you know that Zentari families can have 12 parents and Vex families choose their relationships based on complementary skill sets? And human families, Silver added proudly, are based on love and choice, not just genetics. Just like ours. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and joy. These cubs, who had been rejected as weak and inferior, had become the bridge between worlds. They had learned that strength came not from dominance but from unity. Not from isolation but from inclusion. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus realized that his story, the tale of a human janitor who helped a predator cub and changed the galaxy, was really just the beginning. The real story would be written by all the beings who chose to follow their example, who decided that love was stronger than fear, and that family was defined not by species, but by the bonds they chose to create. The galaxy had once seen humans as weak prey animals, unworthy of respect or consideration. Now, through the simple act of saving two abandoned cubs, they had demonstrated that humanity's greatest strength lay not in claws or fangs or superior technology, but in their unlimited capacity for love and their unwavering commitment to protecting those who could not protect themselves. And in a universe often driven by competition and conflict, that made all the difference.